نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So he says, وَالرَّدُّ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ وُجُوهٍ. We refute them from few different angles. Number one, أن الله تعالى سمى نفسه بأسماء وصف نفسه بصفات. فإن كان إثبات الصفات يستلزم التشبيه فإثبات الأسماء كذلك. وإن كان إثبات الأسماء لا يستلزم التشبيه فإثبات الصفات كذلك. والتفريق بين هذا وهذا تناقض. So he says that Allah Azza wa Jal, He has named Himself with names. He has also described Himself with attributes. So if affirming attributes necessitates tashbih and resemblance, كذلك similarly we say that affirming names also necessitates ماذا؟ تشبيه. And if we say that affirming names doesn't necessitate tashbih, كذلك إثبات الصفات also doesn't necessitate tashbih. So giving a distinction between the two is a contradiction. Okay, so to explain, ikhwan, the Mu'tazila, they affirm what? Names or attributes? Which one do they affirm? Names. And they negate what? Attributes. So we ask them why. What do they say? They say that affirming attributes means tashbih. Sah? We say to them, okay, if affirming names and negating if affirming, Allah Azza wa Jal, He gave Himself names and He gave Himself attributes. Tamam? So if you're saying that affirming the names of Allah Azza wa Jal, if you're saying that affirming Allah's attributes, Allah's sifat attributes necessitates tashbih, necessitates resemblance, then كذلك affirming the names of Allah also aqlan, logically, also necessitates tashbih, because the makhluqat also have names. Okay? And if you were to say no, affirming the names of Allah doesn't necessitate tashbih, then we say to them, okay, then affirming the attributes of Allah likewise doesn't necessitate tashbih. So giving a distinction between the two, the names and the attributes, is tanaqud, is a contradiction. Okay? So either they affirm everything just like the Salaf, or they negate or deny everything just like the Ghulatul Jahmiyyah, the extreme Jahmiyyah and Batiniyah. Okay? Number two, so that's the first angle that we refute them in. Number two, Allah Azza wa Jal, He described His names as Husna, as the most beautiful and perfect. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He invited us to invoke Him by these names. فَادْعُوهُ بِهَا, Allah says. Okay? So that means, alaykum salam. So that means that these names contain within them meanings, and they contain within them attributes. Okay? Does that make sense, ikhwan? The Mu'tazili says, what does the Mu'tazili say? The Mu'tazili says that the names of Allah do not contain any meanings, do not contain any attributes. We say to him, what you have said contradicts what Allah says. Allah described His names بِأَنَّهَا حُسْنَى وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى. Why would Allah describe Himself or His names to be husna, to be the most beautiful and perfect, if they have no meaning or attribute within them? Why would Allah Azza wa Jal tell us to invoke Him and make dua through His names if they have no meaning and they have no attributes? Why? So the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal told us that His names are husna, and the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal told us that His names are the most beautiful, that means that they must have a meaning. They must have an attribute. Okay? And if they were just mere labels, okay? If they were just a'lamun mahdha, just mere labels, then Allah would not have told us to invoke Him through His names, because they're just labels, they have no meaning whatsoever. Okay? So that's the second refutation. The third, أن الله تعالى أثبت لنفسه الصفات إجمالا أثبت لنفسه الصفات إجمالا وتفصيلا مع نفي المماثلة فقال تعالى ولله المثل الأعلى. So Allah Azza wa Jal, the third is Allah Azza wa Jal, He affirmed attributes for Himself, okay, in a general manner sometimes, and in a specific manner, whilst at the same time negating mumathala, negating equality between Himself and His creation. Allah says, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى, and to Allah belongs the highest and loftiest of attributes. And He says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. So that tells us that affirming attributes doesn't necessitate tamthil, doesn't necessitate equality, resemblance, likeness. And if it did necessitate tamthil, then that would make the word of Allah Azza wa Jal contradictory. Does that make sense? يعني Allah Azza wa Jal, He affirmed for Himself attributes. He Himself affirmed attributes for Himself. صح? And then He said that there is nothing like me. There is nothing like my attributes. وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. So if then the Mu'tazili comes along and says, no, we're not going to affirm for Allah His attributes, just like He affirmed. In fact, if we do, then we have fallen into tamthil. يعني the Mu'tazili is contradicting the Quran, word for word, subhanallah. We say to the Mu'tazili, but Allah Himself affirmed for Himself attributes. And then He said, these attributes of mine are unlike any attributes, other attributes. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. You come along, and then Mu'tazili comes along and says, no, I'm not going to affirm for Allah any of His attributes. Why? Because affirming for Allah His attributes causes us to fall into tamthil. So they contradict the Quran. And they're claiming, بِلِسَانِ حَالِهِمْ, okay, they're claiming that Allah's words are contradictory. There's tanaqud in the words of Allah Azza wa Jal. And Allah Azza wa Jal denied the fact that there is tanaqud in His book. وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Allah Azza wa Jal says, يعني أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. يعني if this Quran came from other than Allah, they would have found in it many a contradiction. But so the Mu'tazila, they're claiming that there is a contradiction in the Quran. Number 4, so that أن من لا يتصف بصفات الكمال لا يصلح أن يكون ربا ولا إلها. ولهذا عاب إبراهيم عليه الصلاة والسلام أباه باتخاذه ما لا يسمع ولا يبصر إلها فقال يا أبت لم تعبد ما لا يسمع ولا يبصر ولا يغني عنك شيئا. تمام. So number 4 is, because the Mu'tazila, they strip Allah Azza wa Jal of His perfect attributes, we say to them that whoever doesn't have perfect attributes, a God or a deity or an ilah that doesn't have perfect attributes, لا يصلح أن يكون ربا ولا إلها, isn't befitting to be a Lord or a deity or a God worthy of being worshipped. يعني one of the main attributes of a ilah, يعني Allah Azza wa Jal, we worship Allah Azza wa Jal because He has the most beautiful and perfect attributes. And Ibrahim alayhi salam, he mentioned this, and when he was speaking to his father, okay, he was rebuking his father and his people for worshipping idols by saying, "Oh my father, lima ta'budu ma la yasma'? Why are you worshipping that which cannot hear, that which cannot see, and that which can be of no benefit to you?" Okay, so why are you worshipping that which doesn't have even these attributes? Number 5. The Mu'tazili, remember the Mu'tazili, he said that that Allah has no attributes. They negated all of the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal, صح? So we say to them, كل موجود لا بد له من صفة. Everything that exists, okay, needs to have attributes. If something exists, then it must have some sifat, some attributes that make it distinct from other entities. And he says there's no لا يمكن وجود ذات مجرد عن الصفات. There cannot be something in existence that doesn't have any attributes. And he says, and this is why al-Khaliq al-Wajib al-Wujud, يعني he uses their terminology. He could have said here, وَحِينَئِذٍ لَا بُدَّ أَن يَكُونَ اللَّهُ مُتَّصِفًا. He used their attribute, their description of Allah. Okay? يعني he says, and this is why al-Khaliq al-Wajib al-Wujud, the creator whose existence is a necessary existence, okay, must have attributes that are befitting his existence. Because his existence, they believe and they know, they concede the fact that Allah's existence is wajib al-wujud, is a necessary existence. Whereas the existence of everything else, the makhluqat, is mumkin al-wujud, is an existence that is not necessary. It is an existence that is a possibility or unnecessary. يعني the creation can either exist or cannot exist. One of them needs the other. So you have mumkin al-wujud, wajib al-wujud. And this is some of the mustalahat that they use, but because we are in في معرض الرد عليهم, we are forced to explain it. يعني. Okay, so wajib al-wujud is basically something that is, يعني Allah Azza wa Jalla is wajib al-wujud. His existence is necessary. Why? Because his existence is not dependent or contingent on the existence of other entities. Do you understand? Allah's existence isn't contingent isn't contingent or dependent on the existence of others. Whereas the existence of the creation is contingent, okay, and is dependent on the existence of a wajib al-wujud, of something that existence is necessary. This is a philosophical argument, a logical argument that they use, which يعني we agree with, because it conforms to the Sharia. Do you understand? So what he's saying here is that if Allah, you believe that Allah Azza wa Jal, his existence is wajib al-wujud, يعني he is necessary, and his existence is independent in its very nature. So how can you then say that this entity has no attributes? When you know that then if it is stripped of attributes, that means it's adam. That means it doesn't exist. If I was to say to you now, ikhwan fillah, if I was to say there is a man who doesn't have a face, he doesn't have a head, he doesn't have any arms, he doesn't have any hands, he doesn't have any fingers, he doesn't have any legs, he doesn't have a torso, he doesn't have any ears, he doesn't have any skin, he doesn't have any hair, but there is a man. What would you think of this? Am I describing a Adam? Am I describing something in existence, or am I describing something that doesn't exist? Doesn't exist. Okay, that's why هؤلاء, the Mu'attila, the Jahmiyyah, the Mu'tazila, يعبدون عدما. They worship that which doesn't exist. So do you think, ikhwani fillah, someone who has this aqidah is going to pray Qiyamul Layl and make dua to Allah Azza wa Jal? Why would they make dua to Allah? They don't even believe that His names have meanings. They don't even believe in the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal. So why would they make dua? Why would they have khushu' in their salah? Why would they have... So you can see from here, ikhwani fillah, that Babul Asma'i was Sifat, the chapter of the names and the attributes of Allah, directly affects how you worship Allah Azza wa Jal, and directly affects ubudiyyah and uluhiyyah. Because someone that doesn't believe in the names and the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal, someone that describes Allah with non-existence, okay, that person is not going to have khushu' in his salah if he even prays. Okay, that person is not going to make dua to Allah by saying, Ya Aziz, Ya Ghaffar, Ya Rahman. Because to him, Aziz, Ghaffar, Rahman is the same thing. It has no meaning anyway. If you were to say to him, what does Allah mean? He will say, Allah has no meaning. La ilaha illallah. What does Allah here mean? He will say, it has no meaning. This is the thamara, and this is the fruit of this aqidah, ikhwan fillah. And this is why the Salaf, they spent so much time and effort in refuting this evil creed and ideology. Number 6, أن القول بأن أسماء الله أعلام. So there is some تداخل يعني in these refutations. أن القول بأن أسماء الله أعلام محضة مترادفة لا تدل إلا على ذات الله فقط. يعني when they say that Allah's names are just mere labels, that are synonyms, okay, and they don't indicate to Allah's essence. This is what they say. That قول باطل, that is false speech. Why? لأن دلالات الكتاب والسنة متضافرة على أن كل اسم منها دال على معناه المختص به مع اتفاقها على مسمى واحد وموصوف واحد. He says because the Kitab and the Sunnah are full of the fact يعني that every name of Allah Azza wa Jal indicates to a specific meaning. Okay, indicates to a specific meaning, and every name of Allah has a specific meaning that is different from the other name, whilst all of the names and attributes of Allah indicate to a single entity and to a single essence. Do you understand? So the names of Allah Azza wa Jal are different in their meanings. The attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal are different, but they all indicate to one entity, Allah Azza wa Jal. I'll give you an example. وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. You have attributes, different attributes, right? You could have personal traits. So you could be someone who gets angry very quickly. You could be someone who's moody, or you could be someone who's in their very nature calm and collected. Okay, you could be someone who is at the same time, at the same time you could be someone who deals well with stress. Okay, or someone you could be and these are your personal traits. Okay, your physical traits. You could be left-handed مثلا. You have two legs, you have a face, you have a nose, you have a beard, you have a mustache. These are your attributes. But all of these attributes, they indicate to one entity, physical entity, and that's you. Then each attribute doesn't mean that that's another human being. لا أبدا. All of these attributes indicate to the same person. So he says here, فالله تعالى هو الحي القيوم السميع البصير العليم القدير. So Allah Azza wa Jal, from his names is al-Hayy, al-Qayyum, al-Sami', al-Basir, al-Alim, al-Qadir. فالمسمى والموصوف واحد. Okay, so all of these names are the names of Allah Azza wa Jal. But the musamma, the one being named, والموصوف, and the one being described is one. والأسماء والصفات متعددة, and the names and the attributes are multiple and plenty, but they all indicate to one entity. And then he says that, do you not see that Allah Azza wa Jal in the same place in a single ayah verse, Allah names himself with two names or more. هو الله, and then he mentions Surah Al-Hashr, هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر. So how many names are here? How many names are in this ayah? Allah, okay, Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, Al-Salam, Al-Mu'min, okay, Al-Muhaymin, Al-Aziz, Al-Jabbar, Al-Mutakabbir. How many is that? 9. All of these 9 names, they indicate to one entity, to one entity, to Allah Azza wa Jal. But each of them has a different meaning. If they all had the same meaning, then that would be laghwun fil qawl. It would be pointless to mention 9 things that mean the same thing in the Quran. صح? يعني why would Allah Azza wa Jal mention all of these 9 names in the same place if they all meant the same thing? And al-aslu fil lugha, in the Arabic language, the principle says that the default rule is that if 2 things are mentioned in a sentence, then the asl is a ta'sis, that each one builds upon the other, or each one is different to the other. Why would the Arabs don't have this style of speaking where they mention in the same sentence, the eloquent ones of course, two things that have the exact same meaning, because that would be laghu, that would be pointless and futile. So 9 names of Allah Azza wa Jalla mentioned in Surah Al-Hashr here in verse 23, And all of these 9 names, each of them, has a different meaning, but all of them indicate to the same God, to the same entity, to Allah Azza wa Jal. That's why he said, فَلَوْ كَانَتِ الْأَسْمَاءُ مُتَرَادِفَةً تَرَادُفًا مَحْضًا لَكَانَ ذِكْرُهَا مُجْتَمِعَةً لَغْوًا مِنَ الْقَوْمِ لِعَدَمِ الْفَائِدَةِ. السابع, number 7. أن القول بأن الله تعالى عليم بلا علم قدير بلا قدرة سميع بلا سمع ونحو ذلك قول باطل. So when they say that Allah Azza wa Jal is Alim, so they affirm for Allah the name, but He has no knowledge. Qadir, He is the all-powerful. Bila qudra, but He has no power. Sami', He is the all-hearing. Bila sam', but He has no hearing. هذا باطل, it makes no sense. Okay? And it contradicts the Arabic language and every other language. مثلا إخواني في الله, if does it make sense for مثلا someone, you say to him, oh, this person مثلا can hear. This person has the ability to hear, but he cannot hear. This person is seeing, can see, but he cannot see. It's contradictory, and it makes no sense at all. So he says, فإن من المعلوم في لغات جميع العالم أن المشتق دال على المعنى المشتق منه وأنه لا يمكن أن يقال عليم لمن لا علم له ولا قدير لمن لا قدرة له ولا سميع لمن لا سمع له ونحو ذلك. He says that it is a well-known fact in every language, okay, that a derived name, a name that is derived, always indicates to the meaning from which it is derived from. This is a linguistic rule. A name in any language, a derived name, indicates to the meaning from which it was derived from. Okay? So, لا يمكن أن يقال عليم لمن لا علم له. It's impossible to say alim, the all knowledgeable, for one who has no knowledge, or qadir, the all powerful, for one who has no power, or sami', the all hearing, for one who has no hearing. And if this is the case, he says, then it is wajib for us to believe that Allah's names indicate to what they are derived from, and indicate to mada, an attribute. الثامن, number 8, when they say لا, so he's refuting all of their statements. لا يوجد شيء متصف بالصفات إلا جسم. When they say that there is nothing, لا يوجد شيء متصف بالصفات, there's nothing that can be described with descriptions except a physical body. He says that this is also wrong. Okay, because we can see things, we can describe things that have no physical entity and physical body with descriptions. And he gives examples. For example, the night, al-layl, is the night a physical entity? No. But we can give a description to the night and we can say laylun tawil, it is a long night. Nahar, the daytime, or day is not a physical entity, but we can give it a meaning, we can give it a description and say naharun qasir, it's a short day. Bardun shadid, cold مثلا, the cold or bard, it is extreme cold, extreme heat. So descriptions are not specific to physical bodies. Descriptions can be given to non-physical bodies. So he's refuting this claim of theirs. And then he says that describing Allah with jism, with body, okay, is wrong. Is إثباتا أو نفيا, is a طريقة بدعية. So he says that we don't describe Allah with a body, nor do we negate from Allah the lafzul jism. We don't describe Allah with the word jism, not about, with the word jism, and we don't negate from Allah the word jism. Okay? Okay, because these are because he says من الطرق البدعية التي يتوصل بها للتعطيل النفي الصفات التي أثبتها الله, because the word jism is from the methodologies, the evil innovative methodologies that the people of ta'til use to negate Allah's attributes. So they use the word jism to negate Allah's attributes. So that's why as Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we neither affirm nor do we deny the word jism, lafdul jism. Okay? Number 9, when they said that the al-ajsam mutamathila, that bodies are equal or the same, this is batil. Okay, and this is known, يعني bodies or physical entities are obviously not equal. The third ta'ifa, the third group, so that's the Mu'tazila. The first was the Asha'ira, the second was the Mu'tazila, and now the third is the Jahmiyyah, Ghulatul Jahmiyyah. Ta'ifa الثالثة Ghulatul Jahmiyyah, the extreme Jahmiyyah, والقرامطة والباطنية ومن تبعهم. So we're going to speak about their madhab now. So وطريقتهم أنهم ينكرون الأسماء والصفات. So the Jahmiyyah, they deny both the names and the attributes of Allah. ولا يصفون الله تعالى إلا بالنفي المجرد عن الإثبات. So they only affirm they only describe Allah. The only way they describe Allah is with absolute negation, stripped of affirmation. So this is the tariq of the Jahmiyyah, okay? So they only describe Allah إلا بالنفي المجرد عن الإثبات, يعني absolute negation that is stripped of all affirmation. Okay? And they say, what do they say? What does this mean? Absolute negation, stripped of affirmation. What does that mean? إن الله, they say, إن الله هو الموجود المطلق بشرط الإطلاق. Subhanallah. يعني look how they سوء الأدب مع Allah. They say إن الله هو الموجود المطلق. They say that Allah is the absolute existent, without a condition and without an attribute. بشرط الإطلاق أي مطلق عن الصفات. يعني Allah has no attributes. بشرط الإطلاق means there has no attributes. So the Jahmi says that Allah Azza wa Jal is described only with existence, wujud, mutlaq, free from, and He has no attributes, بشرط الإطلاق. What is that? And then they say, then they clarify this even more. فلا يقال, they say, we don't say huwa mawjud. We don't say that He exists. ولا حي, or we don't say He's alive. ولا عليم, and we don't say that He is knowledgeable. ولا قدير, and that He is all powerful. Why? We ask them why. Because they say هذه أسماء لمخلوقاته, because these are names given to His creation. And some of them, they say they're metaphorical or majaz. And they say that affirming these names necessitates تشبيهه بالموجود الحي. So they say that if we affirm for Allah these names and attributes, then we are comparing Allah to those things that are in existence, that are alive, those things that have knowledge, that have power. So they say that we only affirm Allah with negation, only with nafi, with al-mahd, with pure negation. And remember what we said, pure negation leads to what? Ta'til. So this is the ta'til that Ahl Sunnah was speaking about. So they only describe Allah with pure negation. Just like the king, مثلا, that we spoke about, the example of the king. Yani you are neither a coward, neither you are not a thief, you are not a murderer, you are not, يعني بهكذا. This is the affirmation of the Jahmiyyah. And when they are confronted with this, they say, oh, because if we affirm for Allah any attribute, okay, then that means we are likening Him to His creation. So the only thing we affirm for Allah is that He exists. That's it. He ماذا exists. Okay? And then they even go as far as saying that إن الصفة عين الموصوف. They say that the attribute is identical to the essence. Yani what they're saying is the attribute, and they say that because attributes are identical to the essence, are similar to the essence, so they don't make a difference between an attribute and the that, and between the essence. And they say that every attribute is identical to the other. Every attribute is identical to the other. So according to them, there's no difference between al-ilm, wal-qudra, wal-sam' wal-basar. There's no difference between knowledge, between power, between hearing, between sight. Okay? This is their statement and this is their qawl. They've said a lot of things there, but the gist of it is that they describe Allah Azza wa Jal bin nafi al-mujarrad an al-ithbat, absolute negation stripped of affirmation. Okay? And they say that Allah is absolute existent without any attribute. So they only describe Allah's entity, that, as existing. And they say that Allah's that has no attributes. Okay? And what's their shubha? What's their doubt? Both, yes. They negate asma and sifat, of course. Yeah. So they're only affirming the fact that Allah exists. That's it. Nothing else. Okay? Their shubha, أنهم اعتقدوا أن إثبات الأسماء والصفات يستلزم التشبيه والتعدد. Their shubha, okay, is that they believe that affirming the names and the attributes of Allah necessitates resemblance and ta'addud. This is what they've added. Ta'addud means multiplicity. Multiplicity is a word that I learnt through the Jahmiyyah, subhanallah. Ta'addud, ikhwani fillah, means multiplicity, means that they believe that by affirming the attributes and the names of Allah, you're affirming multiple gods, subhanallah. So if according to the Jahmi, if you believe Allah Alimun, Qadirun, Rahim, let's just use these three, Alim, Qadir, Rahim. According to the Jahmi, you are saying that there are three gods. One is named Alim, the other is named Qadir, and the third is named Rahim. Multiplicity, ta'addud. Okay, and because of that, they've negated mada, as-sifat. So they've made assumptions in their mind about Allah, and then they've built upon those assumptions principles and qawa'id. Okay? This is why Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they say that Ahlul Bid'ah, the people of innovation, يستدلون ثم يعتقدون ثم يستدلون. The people of innovation and ahwa and desires, first they have their false aqidah, false notions, and their false assumptions. Okay? Then they go looking for any evidence out there, whether it's an evidence from the Quran or the Sunnah that they've misinterpreted, or whether it's their own false logical arguments. Whereas Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they find the dalil first, and then they base their aqidah and their creed and their ideology upon mada? Upon the dalil. Tamam. ووجه ذلك في الأسماء. So he explains ووجه ذلك في الأسماء. He says with regards to the names is إذا سمي بها لزم أن يكون متصفا بمعنى الاسم. They say إذا سمي بها, if Allah Azza wa Jal is given a name, they're saying that means that Allah must be described with the meaning in that name. That which is true, of course. فإذا أثبتنا الحي, they say, so if we affirm for Allah al-Hayy مثلا, لازم أن يكون متصفا بالحياة. So if we affirm for Allah al-Hayy, the Jahmi says, then that means that we have to describe Allah with life. Okay? لأن صدق المشتق يستلزم صدق المشتق منه. Because the names, you have to derive attributes from the names. And that means, they say, that Allah will have attributes. And we can't have that, the Jahmi says. We cannot have that. Okay? And that leads to tashbih. As for the sifat, the attributes, okay, they say that inna ithbat sifat mutaghayira mughayira lil mawsuf yastalzimu ta'addud. They say that affirming for Allah different attributes that are different to each other will mean that Allah will mean ta'addud, will mean multiplicity, will mean that Allah has more than, will mean that there will be more than one gods, more than one deities. And that is impossible in Tawheed. So that's the argument and the shubha of the Jahmiyyah. Okay? And this is how we refute them now. So, رَدُّ عَلَيْهِمْ مِنْ وُجُوهٍ. Okay? Number one, أن الله تعالى جمع فيما سمى وصف به نفسه بين النفي والإثبات. Similar to the first refutation of the Mu'tazila and Asha'ira, Allah Azza wa Jal, He has named Himself with names and He has described Himself with descriptions. Okay? And Allah Azza wa Jal, He has combined between an-nafi wal-ithbat. He has combined between negation and affirmation. So Allah sometimes He affirms for Himself attributes and other times He negates from Himself attributes. Okay? وقد سبق أمثلة من ذلك يعني, and he mentioned many examples of this. فمن أقر بالنفي وأنكر الإثبات فقد آمن ببعض الكتاب دون بعض. So whoever believes, whoever affirms negation and denies affirmation, then this person has believed in some of the Quran and disbelieved in others. And this is kufr and disbelief. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, أفتؤمنون ببعض الكتاب وتكفرون ببعض فما جزاء من يفعل ذلك منكم إلا خزي في الحياة الدنيا. يعني speaking to Banu Israel, Allah rebukingly asks them and says to them, do you believe in some of the book whilst you disbelieve in other parts of the book? Okay? And then Allah Azza wa Jal mentions that their jaza and their reward is khizyun fil hayati dunya, is a khizy and disgrace in this life. And that on Yawm al-Qiyamah they will be punished with the greater punishment. So that's the first refutation. The second, أن الموجود المطلق بشرط الإطلاق. What does that mean? الموجود المطلق بشرط الإطلاق. What does that mean? ما معنى هذا؟ الموجود المطلق بشرط الإطلاق. ما معنى هذا؟
The one that pure negation used his existence is
absolute. Okay? بشرط الإطلاق means what? What is بشرط الإطلاق?
The condition of it being unrestricted to any attributes.
نعم أحسنت. موجود المطلق, his existence is absolute. بشرط الإطلاق, without any attribute whatsoever, without any attribute. So absolute, الموجود المطلق is absolute existence without attributes. So this is what he's refuting now, this statement. Okay? He says that saying this, لا وجود له في الخارج المحسوس. This, he's saying that absolute existence that is conditioned upon total abstraction, total abstract, something that doesn't exist, has no existence in the external world. Find for me, O Jahmi, something like this externally. You claim to be someone who's logical. Okay, that means that your logic must have seen something like this, fil wujud. Find for me an entity that exists, that doesn't have any attributes whatsoever. He's not going to be able to. Impossible, akhwan fillah. There cannot be an entity that exists that doesn't have any attributes. Okay? And then he says, وَإِنَّمَا هُوَ, Shaykh Sam says, وَإِنَّمَا هُوَ أَمْرٌ يَفْرِضُهُ الذِّهْنِ. He says that this is something that is assumed and imagined by the mind. It's only in the imagination. And it has لا وجود له في الحقيقة. There is no existence of this في الواقع. Okay? فتكون حقيقة القول به نفي وجود الله تعالى إلا في الذهن. يعني the reality of this sentence is the denial of the existence of Allah Azza wa Jal. The denial of the actual existence of Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay? And Allah exists only in the mind of the Jahmi. So the Jahmi has created and made assumptions and imagination, something that is in their khayal, in their imagination, that has no that has no real external meaning. It has, there's nothing there's nothing in the external world that can be given as an example for what the Jahmi believes in. فهمتم إخوان? And the Shaykh Sam says, وَهَذَا غَايَةُ التَّعْطِيلِ وَالْكُفْرِ. And this is the pinnacle, or this is the utmost negation. This is the worst type of negation and kufr and disbelief. Subhanallah. That's the second refutation. The third, قولهم إن الصفة عين الموصوف, that when they say that the attributes are identical to that which is being described, and that every attribute is identical to the other, مكابرة في المعقولات سفسطة في البديهيات. يعني he says that this is something that goes against logic, okay, and that is something that is irrational, and that is something that is absurd and silly to even believe in, okay, because he says that we know out of necessity, with logic, with our perceptions, okay, the attributes are different to that which is being described. Everyone knows the attributes and sifat are different to the mawsuf. You have attributes, are your attributes the same as you? La. Okay? And that we know that attributes cannot be identical. Okay? So مثلا العلم فالعلم غير العالم والقدرة غير القادر والكلام غير المتكلم. Okay? And كما أن العلم والقدرة والكلام صفات متغايرة. So العلم, knowledge, power, speech, they are different attributes. They are rather different attributes. Number 4, أن وصف الله تعالى بصفات الإثبات أدل على الكمال من وصفه بصفات النفي لأن الإثبات أمر وجودي يقتضي تنوع الكمالات في حقه. He says that describing Allah with attributes of بصفات الإثبات, describing Allah with affirmative attributes is more indicative of Allah's perfection than describing Allah through negation. Remember, we covered this last night. Describing Allah with affirmation is akmal, is more perfect and shows more respect to Allah Azza wa Jal than describing Him with nafi, than describing Him with mada, with negation. Why? لأن الإثبات أمر وجودي يقتضي تنوع الكمالات في حقه. Why? Because affirmation إثبات أمر وجودي, يعني affirmation is something that exists, okay, and it necessitates تنوع الكمالات في حقه. It necessitates that Allah Azza wa Jalla has different types of perfect attributes. As for النفي, as for negation, فأمر عدمي, يعني it is something that indicates to emptiness, okay, and it doesn't indicate to perfection إلا إذا تضمن إثباتا, unless it contains ماذا, affirmation, okay. And these nufat, the Jahmiyyah, they لا يقولون بنفي يقتضي الإثبات. They don't say that, they don't negate Allah a negation that comes with affirmation. So what the Shaykh is saying here is, you have affirmation. We learned that from yesterday's lessons that affirmation, okay, is better than negation, because describing Allah with affirmation is describing Allah with attributes that actually exist, and describing Allah with negation is describing Allah with emptiness, okay. And we only describe Allah with negation, we only do it if the negation is coupled with ماذا, with affirmation. Who can give me مثلا an example of Allah negating something from Himself? نعم.
This contains both affirmation and...
No, just negation. You can mention it with affirmation as well. كيف؟
ليس كمثله شيء.
نعم. ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير. So Allah here negated ليس كمثله شيء. Then He affirmed for Himself وهو السميع البصير, but He is also السميع البصير. Allah says لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم. صح? Negation. So لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم means, what does that mean? Allah Azza wa Jal, what does that mean? Slumber or sleep. Allah Azza wa Jal is not overtaken neither by slumber nor sleep. صح? Tamam. So as Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, do we just believe in the negation? Do we just believe, oh Allah, we negate from Him slumber and sleep? That's it. La. We also have to believe in the opposite of slumber and sleep. What is the opposite of a slumber and sleep? Al-Hayat wa Al-Qayyumiyah. Complete life and complete self-subsistence, self-independence. Qayyumiyah. Okay? وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. Allah Azza wa Jal says, لا وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. Allah does not oppress anyone. صح? So we negate from Allah which attribute? Dhulm, oppression. Whilst at the same time affirming what? Kamalul adl, perfect justice of Allah Azza wa Jal. وهكذا. So every attribute that is negated, it's only negated because we believe in kamalu ضدها, the perfect opposite of that negated attribute. فهمتم إخواني في الله? So even Ahlul Sunnah Jama'ah, when they're negating, in the negation, affirmation is also mentioned. They believe in affirmation. Whilst the Jahmi doesn't believe in that. The Jahmi just negates. The Jahmi just negates until he's negated Allah from everything. Because remember what we learned yesterday. Okay? النفي المحض يؤدي إلى إيش؟ التعطيل. Pure negation leads to ماذا? Leads to stripping Allah of all of His names and attributes. Okay? Number 5, قولهم. Number 5, قولهم. إن إثبات صفات متغايرة مغايرة للموصوف يستلزم التعدد. You know when they said that affirming different attributes, okay, then that leads to multiplicity, that leads to the existence of more than one deity or God. قول باطل مخالف للمعقول المحسوس. Shaykh Sam says that is a false statement that contradicts al-ma'qul wal-mahsus, that contradicts يعني logic, and that it contradicts perception. فإنه لا يلزم من تعدد الصفات تعدد الموصوف. فها هو الإنسان الواحد يوصف بأنه حي سميع بصير عاقل متكلم إلى غير ذلك من صفاته ولا يلزم من ذلك تعدد ذاته. He says that this is قول باطل. Why is it قول باطل? He says because just يعني تعدد الصفات, mentioning more than one attribute of Allah, believing in more than one attribute of Allah, doesn't mean that there is more than one God or with more than one described entity. Okay? فَهَا هُوَ الْإِنسَانُ الْوَاحِدُ. You can see this is the human. One human being, مثلا, can be described with more than one things, more than one attributes. He can be described بأنه حي. He can be described with life, بأنه حي, that he is alive. سميع, that he is the all-hearing. Basir, that he is the all, يعني not astaghfirullah, يعني that he can be described with life. With sami', that he can be described with hearing. Basir, he can be described with sight. Aqil, mutakallim. Okay? And that doesn't mean that there is more than one human being. That doesn't mean that there's more than one human being. Number 6. قولهم في الأسماء. Okay? Their statement in the names of Allah Azza wa Jal, أن إن إثباتها يستلزم أن يكون متصفا بمعنى الاسم فيقتضي أن يكون إثباتها تشبيها. Their statement with regards to the names of Allah Azza wa Jal, when they say that يعني affirming the names of Allah indicates يستلزم أن يكون متصفا, indicates the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal has attributes. Okay? فيقتضي يكون متصفا بمعنى الاسم فيقتضي أن يكون إثباتها تشبيه. يعني when they say that giving Allah a name means that Allah has attributes, and that leads to tashbih, and that leads to ماذا? Likening or resembling Allah to His creation. That statement of theirs, how do we respond to it? جوابه أن المعاني التي تلزم من إثبات الأسماء صفات لائقة بالله تعالى غير مستحيلة عليه. We say to them that this is possible. صح. يعني we say to them that these meanings that are binding upon us to believe in, يعني once we affirm for Allah His names, okay, then this is not something that is impossible. Okay? And this is something that is yumkin, sahih. We agree with you in this. However, sharing the names, يعني the fact that Allah shares the same names with His creation, and He shares the same attributes with His creation, okay, doesn't necessitate equality in the named entities and the described entities. So just because Allah is Sami'un Basir and the makhluqat, as we mentioned, is also Sami'un Basir, doesn't mean that the Sam' of the makhluqat and the Basar of the makhluqat is similar to the Sam' and the Basar of Allah Azza wa Jal. So just because, so the shared usage of the names doesn't necessitate equality and similarity. The shared usage of the names doesn't necessitate similarity and equality in their realities. So the reality of the names and the attributes are different, even though the usage of the names and attributes linguistically is the same. Okay, واضح إخوان؟ تمام. Number 7. قولهم إن الإثبات يستلزم تشبيهه بالموجودات. Their statement, the Jahmi statement, that affirming Allah's names and attributes necessitates comparing Allah to that which exists. Remember, they describe Allah, they said that Allah Azza wa Jal huwa mawjudun, huwa al-mawjud al-mutlaq bi-shart al-itlaq, which means that He is the absolute existence, and He doesn't have any attributes. Bi-shart al-itlaq means without a condition, يعني without any condition, without any attribute. That's what they said, right? And then they said that Allah Azza wa Jal, if we give Him attributes, then we have made Him similar to the mawjudat. We have made Him similar to that which is in existence, from those things that are existent. Because everything in existence may have attributes or has attributes. So if we describe Allah Azza wa Jal with names and attributes, then we have described Him with that which exists. Okay? How do we respond to this? We say to them that negating Allah Azza wa Jal from, or stripping Allah Azza wa Jal from His names and attributes, okay, is you, O Jahmi, describing Allah Azza wa Jal or comparing Allah Azza wa Jal with that which doesn't exist, with ma'dumat, with that which doesn't exist. So by you saying that we don't want to describe Allah with that which exists, we're saying to you, we're using the same logic, and we're saying, by you saying this, by you stripping Allah, of His names and attributes, you are describing Allah with that which is worse than that which exists, and you're describing Him with that which does not exist. ممتنعات, معدومات, something that doesn't exist في الواقع. واضح إخواني في الله? Is that more point clear? Let me repeat. The Jahmi, إخواني في الله, the Jahmi describes Allah with pure negation. صح? No. We all know pure negation. Okay? So he describes Allah with pure negation. يعني Allah is not حي ولا سميع ولا بصير ولا قدير ولا, He doesn't exist. يعني He's not this, He's not that. Just like I said to you, the man, the example of a man. He has no face, he has no ears, he has no eyes, he has no legs, he has no feet, he has no torso, he has no heart, he has no intestines, he has no lungs, he has no kidneys, he doesn't exist. يعني. So by stripping Allah of His names and attributes, they've compared Allah with that which doesn't exist. So Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, what do? They compare Allah, they compare Allah Azza wa Jal, or they liken Allah. Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they say to them that what you have done is you have compared يعني Allah Azza wa Jal to that which does not exist, with ma'dumat. And logically, which يعني is worse? I'm not going to say which is better. I'm going to say which is worse. Which is worse? Describing Allah Azza wa Jal with that which, comparing Allah to that which exists, or comparing Allah to that which doesn't exist? Of course the second is worse. Okay? So this is how we refute them. So Shaykh al-Islam says, وَحِينَئِذٍ فَإِمَّا أَنْ يُقِرُّوا بِالْإِثْبَاتِ فَيُوَافِقُوا الْجَمَاعَةِ. So يعني either they affirm, they affirm affirmation, and they believe in affirmation, and they agree with the Jama'ah, يعني أهل السنة والجماعة. وَإِمَّا أَنْ يُنْكِرُوا النَّفِي, or they disbelieve يعني in negation. Okay? just like they disbelieved in affirmation, and then they will agree with the غلاة الغلاة. There's يعني the extreme قرامطة and باطنية. يعني there's يعني believe it or not إخواني في الله, there is worse than the Jahmiyyah, and it's coming than the others. يعني each one is worse than the other. The Asha'ira, then the Mu'tazila are worse than the Asha'ira, the Jahmiyyah are worse than the Mu'tazila, and so on and so forth. يعني ظلمات بعضها فوق بعض. يعني if you thought this was bad, wait until you hear the طائفة الرابعة, يعني غلاة الغلاة. نعم. So هذا تناقض ظاهر. What time is the Asr? 3 o'clock? Is that the إقامة يعني? طيب إن شاء الله نقف عند هذا الحد. We'll stop here, and in the next 9 minutes or so, if you have any questions, you can ask إن شاء الله.